Okay, so for today's hours, I want to go over some really quick, high level stuff in terms of ethically collecting and sharing stories that you can put on your website. And then I'm so excited to see all of your questions that are going to come in. Because like I said, this is going to be kind of quick hit top level stuff. And then really just excited to actually get your questions answered, especially with the expertise from Wired Impact to talk even more about the actual website stuff too, right? So, um, hey, why wait? Let's get right in, right? Okay, so starting off strong, real quickly, just want to introduce myself. David already did a wonderful job, but I am the marketing director here at MemoryFox. I did organize and create the 2023 and the 2024 Ethical Storytelling Report. Before that, I did work at nonprofits, so I worked at a lot of different missions, a lot of different sizes, a lot of different revenue streams. I mostly specialized in communications, peer-to-peer campaigns, sponsorships, and special events. I don't even know if you could call that specializing in anything because that's so many things, but those are the things that I got to work on most. Some of the really cool nonprofits that I have either worked at or volunteered for include the Breast Cancer Coalition, Coda Support Foundation, the Wiley Network, Kenya Lacrosse Association, and the BOMA Project. I always like to shout out the really cool places, the real cool missions that I've been a part of. So like I said, all of the information today is actually something that I gleaned from the 2024 Ethical Storytelling Report. So what the report is, if you want to get a copy, you can go ahead and download it. It's completely free to download. But the idea behind the report was we really felt like there was not a resource out there where all of kind of the top thought leaders that were thinking about ethical storytelling had put their thoughts in one place. So this report is long, it's thorough. There are a lot of topics covered. So if you are interested in deep diving any of the topics we talked today or just learning from any of our 30 experts that are featured in the report, highly recommend a download. And then, let me know what you like about the report because I'm going to start to put together the 2025 report any day now. So would love to hear things that you like, things that should be included in next year's report as well. But yeah, from a top level, kind of the biggest things that the report covers include ethical story collection, trauma-informed interviewing, stereotype stories, consent, and privacy. So today, I want to start off by first talking about ethical story collection. I know that's a big topic that people often have questions about because they think, well, or they know that the stories that that come from their community might be a little sensitive or a little challenging to collect in the past. So I first want to start off by saying I have 5 keys to ethical story collection. But before I share, I do want to share a really cool example of a story that we would consider an ethically collected story. So this comes from our friends at I Would Rather Be Reading. They are a nonprofit located in Kentucky. If you have heard of them before, give me a thumbs up in the chat, or if you just think that that sounds like a great mission, give me a thumbs up in the chat. But they are located in Kentucky, and they started as an after-school program, and now they've expanded to summer programs as well, and it's all focused on reading. So they do a wonderful job of that, and they are great ethical storytellers. So here's just a clip from one video that they collected for their nonprofit.
Hi, Miss Kennedy, and I am the second grade and I go to Kudamouth Elementary, and I like after school program because we do a lot of fun things and we get to do, and we also get to do our homework, and we get to go outside.
So I love that she says that she loves to do her homework. I think that makes this video just really prime content, but really nice shareable content that's collected in real time. So that brings me to our 5 keys to ethical story collection. Let me just start with number 1. So number 1 would be to give your community the microphone. So what I mean by that is that with today's technology, you don't actually need to speak for others anymore. And when you actually give your community the opportunity to speak for themselves, they are going to feel more empowered to actually share exactly the details of the story that they are wanting to be publicly shared. So that's just a great consideration when you're thinking about ethical story collection. Number 2 is to encourage sharing where and when they are comfortable. So when you allow space for your storyteller to choose the time and place that they are going to share their story with you, that is going to reduce the stress that your storyteller feels, as well as build trust with your storyteller and your organization. So you'll actually find that over time, when you are giving your storyteller that agency to decide where and when they're comfortable sharing, that's going to lead to them having more details to share and just feeling overall like your brand is more trustworthy. Number 3 is to be upfront about how you intend to use their story. So a great example here is that a storyteller, they might be willing to share more or less information based on where you're going to share their story or how you're going to use their story. So if you know upfront that you're trying to collect stories that you will be sharing on social media, let's let our storytellers know while they're being recorded or while they're taking that video themselves. And then they can really say, okay, I have context here. It's going to go in front of this group of people, this amount of people. These are the details that I actually feel comfortable sharing for an audience like that. On the flip side, if you are saying that you're only collecting stories for an upcoming grant report, maybe you just need to get a few impact stories that can go into some grant reports, and you let your storyteller know, hey, this is only going to be seen by this select group of people. They might be willing to share more details and add more context for you because they will feel like they fully understand the storytelling process. Number 4 is to use prompts with strength-based messaging. So that video I showed you from I Would Rather Be Reading, they are exceptional at using strength-based messaging for their prompts, and that's why they get their kids so excited to say things on camera. It's also another great way that they are able to ensure that the parents are willing to give consent for those kids' stories to be shared. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about strength-based messaging on the next slide, but such a good thing to keep in mind. And my 5th key is to capture stories in real time and all year long. So you can see that that video was shot on the playground, probably in the middle of her enjoying the day or in the activity, right? She really had a fresh answer off the top of her head because she'd probably just experienced it. So this is a great key because, we're not trained actors. We don't usually have stories that we've rehearsed off the top of our head. So what that means is it can actually be kind of hard to recall how you're feeling, or to elicit the same passion that you once felt if you're not recording stories in real time. So when you are able to make space during your programs or during your fundraising events or during your volunteer events to ask some questions, get some recordings, collect stories, then that's when you're going to get the most passionate stories, the most honest and real stories, and it's going to really avoid those gaps. All right, when we're thinking about strength-based messaging, this is an example from our friends at Horizons National that I always love to show. So Horizons National, to give you a little context, they are a national brand that has affiliate schools all across the country. And they also do after-school programs and summer programs. So they have programs where they teach children how to swim during the summer. They do reading programs. They have a lot of ways that they support their affiliate school. But the really cool thing that Horizons National has done is they actually created a strength-based messaging guide that they sent out to all of their affiliates, and really brought them into the conversation to say, hey, this is how we would like to talk about the communities we work with now. This is how we are going to do it. So they put this nice graph. This is just one little snippet from that guide, but I love how they put this visual in here to say, hey, we recognize this was the stereotype-based communication, the way we used to refer to our community. Their example here is saying, Horizons programs transform the lives of low-income students. So that's a sentence they used to put in their messaging, used to be on their website. And, then they kind of show this evolution to a need-based communication and now ultimately to what they use now, which is strength-based communication. So an example of how they would talk about their community now on their website would be, Horizons programs support students in setting their own goal and provide opportunities for them to build social, emotional, and academic skills to reach them. So that is just a nice way where you can visually say, hey, this is what we all believe in. This is how we're going to talk about our community. We recognize maybe we have done other things in the past, but this is how we're doing it moving forward. Oh, and I also want to say that I think Sometimes people can get caught up on the idea of strength-based messaging as something that will be completely different and maybe completely overwhelming to give a try. But I would actually say there are quite a few examples sort of that are really kind of built into our everyday life now that you might be surprised you're actually already using. So for example, we often see for a domestic violence shelter that they are now referring to the people that they work with as survivors of domestic violence, which would be the strength-based person first term to use, as opposed to a previous term, which might have been domestic violence victim. Raise your hand in the chat if you have seen that change already, if you've seen the change from people using the term survivor versus victim. I bet you have all seen this in some context at this point. Another really common one that you see quite often is it would be referring to someone as a person who is currently unhoused, as opposed to a person who is homeless or a homeless person, right? So really thinking about that strength-based person first term. Okay, so that is a huge topic. Again, if you want to learn a lot more about ethical story collection, ask me a question, but also get that report so we can check it out together and you can learn everything from there. All right, let's talk a little bit about consent. So consent is actually its own section in the report. There are 3 big parts. Consent is one of them because there are so many nuances to consent and there are so many things to consider. So what I have tried to do for you today is break down a various topic into 4 keys to consent. So let me know how I do. But number 1, maybe the biggest thing that I want to hit home that maybe, and also kind of the easiest thing you can get started to do tomorrow would be to commit to getting written or electronic consent. So let's no longer rely on verbal consent or implied consent. What I mean by that is somebody is going to, maybe they send you an email where they wrote this wonderful testimonial about working with your team and how much hope it brought them and relief it brought them and made them just feel so overwhelmed with the support and they're feeling so much better, right? Let's not assume that we are now able to use that content on our website. Instead, we really need to have a system in place where we go back to them and say, wow, this was so wonderful, so powerful that you shared it with me. Would you be willing to fill out my consent form or to click this electronic checkbox and let me know if I'm okay to use this story in this way? This often also comes up when we're talking about big group activities. So if you have programs that meet in person, if you have big volunteer events, big fundraising events, often you might have a videographer or photographer there. And people will say, well, how do I gather consent from a big group of people? And I would recommend putting that into your registration process or putting it into the sign-up process for something along those lines. Letting people know whether it's an opt-in or an opt-out situation, there will be a photographer here, there will be a videographer here, we will be capturing content to use with this intent. Are you okay with that? All right. So that's kind of maybe the biggest first thing you can get started doing. And then I would say, if you feel like you are really nailing it with getting written consent or getting electronic consent, it's a good plan to always want to strive for informed consent. So there are a lot of nonprofit consultants that do a really, really great job teaching nonprofits the best practices for informed consent. So this is a very small just few little tip version of informed consent. So keep looking into it if you want to learn more. But a couple ways that you can kind of prioritize what we would consider to be informed consent is to actually be with your storyteller and walk through that consent form with them, just to make sure if they have any questions that come up, they feel like they are fully understanding what is in your consent form and what they're agreeing to. And also providing alternative ways for them to understand consent language. So we all know from going to high school, college, grad school, we all learn in different ways, right? So let's remember that that still exists outside of formal education. So people might just by chance learn better by watching a video that's saying your consent form or listening to audio that's going through your consent. Giving people another option is a great way to ensure that they are learning in the way that it's easiest for them. Additionally, if your community primarily speaks another language, it's a really good idea to have a translator available or have your consent form translated by somebody who also speaks that language primarily. And I put cameras for girls on that slide because they have a great case study report where they talk about making these changes. All right, for number 3, this is a great key, and it's that consent is not in perpetuity. So we want to move away from a process of saying, hey, I collected this story, I'm going to use it forever and ever, and I'm never going to ask for any other updates. I'm never going to ask for consent again. Let's remove that narrative from our sentences and let's instead say, hey, we have a system in place where we're going to check back every 5 years, every 2 years, whatever works for you. And just remind ourselves there might be a lot of different reasons that somebody might not want that story shared again in the future. So they have agreed to something at one point and you honored that. Let's not assume that they're going to agree again in the future. So let's check back. Another great way to do this is to always provide an option for removal, for actual consent removal. So that's something we built into MemoryFox, where when somebody submits a story, they always have the option to now take back their story. Maybe they thought about it and a week later they just said, you know what, I actually don't want that video shared, or I actually no longer want that photo shared. And in that case, when we're talking about stories being shared on websites specifically, when somebody removes that consent, let's take that story down, right? And then, yeah, I already touched on this, but checking back in regularly, you're actually probably going to find that in some cases, it might be hard to get back in communication with some of your storytellers. And of course, in that way, that means you might be in a position where you need to retire that story. But on the flip side, you also might find that you check back in with storytellers and they are saying, wow, you know what? I'm totally fine with you sharing that story. However, I have an update for you. Let me tell you about how my life has been further impacted, or let me tell you about the 10 other people that I have now helped with what you taught me. So this is a great, checking back in regularly is a great way to expand on a story and also continue to learn more about your community. And then finally, I have been working with my friend Allie Levine. She is a nonprofit attorney. She introduced this idea to me that consent at its core, of course, when you talk to an attorney, is about risks, right? So when you're thinking about writing what needs to be included in your consent forms, in your release forms, we need to be thinking about the risks that are associated with that for your storyteller as well as for your nonprofit on both sides, right? So that comes with a process of identifying, assessing, managing, and monitoring your risks. It also comes with a process of thinking about your own state laws, taking a look at your state laws. That is super important because laws are different in every state. And then, of course, if you are able to have somebody on your board or somebody that you can go to for legal counsel, maybe somebody like Allie, for example, it's a great idea to just get that language checked over with them and make sure that you are mitigating your risks. All right, moving right along, let's talk about cool story sharing. So when we are thinking about sharing a story, we have been taught again and again that the most important part of a story is the emotion that you're bringing out of your potential donors, right? If we're talking about getting people to be motivated to give, that often comes with an emotional story, right? By evoking an emotion, by making people feel something. However, maybe historically we have done that in a way where you might consider it called poverty porn. Let me know if you've heard that term before. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you've heard that term before. That's not something we want to do in the future, of course. But so kind of when you're thinking about avoiding that old-fashioned kind of poverty porn style story, we're going to start thinking about these 4 things to remember when you're writing an emotional story. A lot of people with hands up, so they've seen that before. All right, so number 1 is to consider the golden rule. So we probably all remember learning the golden rule when we were in kindergarten or first grade. It means, of course, to treat others the way you want to be treated. But this is a really good rule for storytelling as well. And because before you share a story, think about if you were the main character, or if a loved one were the main character. What would, or Are you okay with how that story is being portrayed? Would you want your story told that way? If you're looking at this story and you're saying, no, that makes me uncomfortable, it's definitely time to go back to that editing process and rethink a few things. Number two, this one I love, is so important, and that is to remember that positive emotions are still emotions. So there have been a lot of studies, especially lately, that are coming out that show that actually eliciting positive emotions from your donors are actually not only encouraging them to give now, but encouraging them to give again and again in the future, which of course recurring giving is the gold mine for everybody, right? So, um, I think that we often think if we are telling an emotional story, it needs to be about sadness, despair, even anger, things that are making us feel all these negatively charged emotions. But I want to remind you, there's a full spectrum of emotions, again, that inspire audiences to give. So when I'm thinking about impactful storytelling, I like to elicit hope or relief when I'm talking about my clients, right? Um, when you are able to write a story that is going to give the donor hope for the future, like you're really solving a problem, or relief, like you have really solved a problem for your client, for your family member, for your constituent, you're able to really give that donor the feeling that, hey, I'm a part of this long term solution. I want to continue to be a part of this long term solution. I like the way this makes me feel. Number three, a little bit similar, but number three is to remember that big trauma is not a necessity in all stories. So we, again, tend to think that emotionally appealing stories need to have some sort of big trauma or really serious issue at its crux. But if anybody is on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, watching Reels, watching YouTube Shorts, we know the way people are consuming content right now is not about just talking about big trauma that has been overcome. In fact, it's about really short, small snippet stories, little glimpses of hope, little glimpses of the future, little glimpses of relief. That's the content people are taking in right now. So let's take note of that and let's start using that for our storytelling as well. In fact, we are finding that you don't actually have to be as traumatic. You don't have to talk about things that are as traumatic anymore or feel as awful. People are really taking content on a much smaller scale. So just trusting the power of storytelling, keeping up with kind of how people are wanting to take in content is such an important reminder. And number four is to remember words matter. You either don't know the right ones. So David kind of said this at the top. We talked a little bit about it's totally okay if you don't know what the right language is. And it's okay to be vulnerable and ask. When you're upfront with your storytellers and you say something like, hey, I want to ask you about this, not sure if this is the right language, people are going to be understanding of that and they're going to help you fill in those blanks. So whether it's because of their current situation, their background, their race, their gender, their physical status, if you're going to just approach them with humility and honesty, that is going to be okay. You're going to learn together. It's also just a great reminder that we're all learning and these things are changing in real time. Another thing I want to touch on today, one aspect of ethical story sharing I often don't think it's considered enough, and this is such an important context, especially for websites, is the idea of the story consumer and how the story consumer is going to be taking in your story. So one of the questions I posed in the report is, what is the best way to share stories while being sensitive towards triggering others? And this specific answer came from Maria Bryan. She does a lot of work specifically on trauma-informed storytelling. So if you are want to get a certification in that, definitely take her course. It's phenomenal. We send our customers to her all the time. But she said content warnings allow us to share lived experiences while supporting the individual agency and the well-being of our audience. So what she means is that when you what she means by the well-being of our audience is that when you clearly label distressing material, you're giving your story consumer the ability to choose if they'd like to continue or not. So let's talk about where this might come into play. These are kind of my overall list of content recommendations for warnings. Of course, your mission might have something else that you would want to put on this list. But as a kind of a top level look down, let's talk about sexual assault, domestic abuse or child abuse, animal cruelty or animal death, self-harm or suicide, eating disorders or violence. So if somebody is coming to your website, it is often that they, once they've learned about your mission, maybe they are already a little bit prepared to kind of take in content like this. It's still a good idea to let people know ahead of time before they start reading the story that these topics might occur. This also comes into play a lot when you are thinking about posting things on social media, maybe that go back to your website, a new blog post, something like that, because you never know who might be triggered by your story when they're just going about their day-to-day scrolling, right? When they're just trying to kind of just take a few minutes out of their day and really just, kind of plug into something else. There is, of course, the classic saying, we've all heard it, and that is, people won't remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. So you don't want your brand associated with something that triggers people and makes them want to swipe away or X out of your website quickly because it's made them uncomfortable. Instead, we want to bring them into the conversation and make them feel like they have the agency to decide if they are ready for this content. Okay, that was my very quick overview, but now I want to show some examples from our own MemoryFox storytellers of content that they've shared on their own websites. So let me see here. I'm gonna click here, go to this slide here. I might have to change my share setting actually for a second, so I can get to the web page. Okay, let me do this. I'll share my screen too. Okay, great. So now if I click on this, I should be able to open up their website. Okay, so this comes from Pan Foundation. They have this really great page. It's just called Story. And when they go to their website, they have this great page where they are showing, the smiling faces of the people, the story, the photos that they submitted of themselves, along with their own story, where you can click in and read more about Peggy. You can read more about Tim. They have all these great stories here, and they go on and on. But the other really cool thing I want to share, so this is how they share their story, right? But another thing I want to show you here is it's not just an opportunity for them to share stories. They actually have this page set up where you also can now collect stories too. So they have this here. If you're a patient or a provider that works with them, share your story here. And it goes right to that, this goes to a MemoryFox link, of course. But then they have this, they can go right to going to share their story. Similarly, they have, if you want to talk about policy and specifically, here's another way where you can share your experience right now. It goes to this other page where you can talk about that. So I love how they set this up where people have the option to kind of decide what them to do. All right, let's take a look at another example here. One sec. Let me just get back to my example. Okay. Blessman International. Another great example here. I'll show you their website. This is their homepage. This is all content that they have collected ethically through MemoryFox. But I love this content. It's really powerful, but you also can tell that it's real, right? You can see the real photos that somebody took while they were on their mission. And they just show like smiling faces. They show the real raw stuff that they're doing together, the real people that are enjoying, and they have some videos here as well to kind of give you context because, a lot of people might not have the opportunity to go experience something like this in person. So being able to show real photos and videos of what their mission is doing in action is a very cool way that they are showing this on their website. All right, from Cure Epilepsy, this is stories from their community. So this is kind of similar to the Pan Foundation. They have this page set up where you can set your story here at the top. Which is super fun. You can go, if that was your intention, first thing you do is decide to come share your story here. Or of course you can get through, and I love how they set this all up to be kind of interactive and like different sizes. It's very appealing to the eye to want to check out these stories and to kind of keep going down and scrolling down until you find, a few that you want to read or ones that you want to like click further into. So we'll love this up. Link housing. Okay, here's a really interesting one from Link Housing. So they have they provide housing, but they actually provide like full service community support when it comes to housing. So what they have done, which is a really cool way to collect and share stories, is they actually made it so their residents, the people who work with the individuals who are getting housing from them, they are actually required to collect 3 stories a month and add it to their story page. So if you are a supporter of Link Housing, if you are a resident of Link Housing, if you are a board member, you can always come to their website and see new content every single month. So this is their homepage. I want to show you that they actually have this on their menu where it says Meet Our Residents right here. And it links over to this, like I said, a story page through MemoryFox. And they actually have all this content. The newest content populates right at the top here. You can click into each one and learn more about and what's going on here. And really, it's just really fun because you can see new stuff all the time. Okay, final example before we get to our Q&A. We have this one coming from Urban Health Partnerships, which is their Harmony for Health story page. So this is an embedded story page where, again, can be updated in real time, but this is on their website, right? So again, this is just a really fun example where they show the afternoon, one of their gatherings that they had. It's an afternoon of music, purpose, community. They got the date here. This one is pretty new. This is from last month. So, they had people submit videos of the event, all these wonderful photos. People could really get a feel of what's going on and kind of the fun that was experienced at this event. All right. So, yeah, those are some great examples. I can more about them if anybody has any questions, of course. But just to wrap up quickly before we get to the Q&A, I want again say if you want to learn more about these strategies, definitely download the report. And now, David and Nikki, I'm ready. Let's get some questions. What do you think?